Hey everyone, welcome back to another video. You may have heard recently that everyone is angry at Superman, and today I want to talk about why that is, and more importantly, why I think they're just being a bit silly. So, long-term viewers here may know that I am a huge fan of comics. I love them. My favourites, as I've spoken about like many times, are like Fables and Y the Last Man and The Boys and Sweet Tooth. Sandman is also fantastic as well. And when it comes to the whole Marvel or DC debate, I think it's very clear from everything I've ever done that I am very firmly on the side of DC. I love DC comics. Just for some reason, I can't get into the Marvel ones. I don't know why. Batman is probably easily my favourite, I guess, like hero. The whole kind of like world of Gotham, if you can even call it that, is probably like my favourite thing to read about. So I'm always reading kind of like Batman comics, Poison Ivy, Harley, Joker, stuff with the Penguin, even stuff with like Nightwing, and basically anything that is or ever was a spin-off of Batman or related to him or set in Gotham. I love the Batwoman comics, just everything really. I love it all. But I'm also quite a fan of Superman. I would say like the amount of Superman comics that I've read, and again also if we include the spin-offs like the Supergirl stuff and even like Superboy and whatever, it's more like in the hundreds of issues rather than quite literally thousands, which there are. I'm rambling a bit, but the point I think I'm trying to make is I'm a Superman fan and I'm very aware of Superman and his history and a lot of the comics and a lot of the storylines, but I am by no means an expert. So I think there'll be a lot of you out there watching this video who are probably more familiar with certain aspects of Superman and his history than I am. So if you want to provide any extra examples of the points I'm talking about in this video, please feel free to do so down in the comments. So that's my background out of the way. Why are people mad at Superman? So as always, DC tend to release kind of like teasers for upcoming issues, storylines, new characters, new series that they're doing. They release, you know, it's basic advertisement and marketing. They want to get people excited about their comics. It's what they do. And back in July they started a new series called Superman, Son of Kal-El, which is like their main Superman series that they're doing at the minute. There's also Superman 78 and a few little bits like that, but this is kind of meant to be their big main Superman focus at the moment. So far only 4 issues have been released, but we've seen John Kent, who is the son of Superman, as in Kal-El Superman, and Lois Lane, his kind of long-term love interest and reporter. Their son John Kent has been kind of aged up a little bit with a storyline where he went off with his granddad and whatever, and he's now a teenager and he is taking up the title of Superman on Earth. That's about it. That's the premise of the series. He's the new Superman. Simple as that. Because this is a new series and they want to hype it up, DC, as they always do, like I've said, released some promotional images and some teasers of upcoming storylines and things that they're going to be doing. One of these was a cover image showing John marching with his friends to protest climate change, and this has people super angry for reasons. Another was the reveal that in the upcoming issue 5, which should be out very soon actually, depends when I get this video out, but soon, there is going to be like an upcoming story arc in which John kind of questions his sexuality and explores his sexuality a little bit, and part of this story is him sharing a kiss with his friend Jay, who just so happens to also be a man. Apparently this whole thing is meant to be a whole storyline about John kind of realizing he's bisexual, and as such he shares a kiss with a man. Here's the image. It's not a big deal. People are really mad about this as well. So as well as people being angry at both of these specific images for issues which we will discuss in more detail in the upcoming video, these have also kind of sparked bigger complaints from people who have clearly never read Superman or superhero comics in their life, with people saying, comics are becoming too political, comics are becoming too sexualized, these damn comics are un-American. That's my complaining voice. Which honestly may just be the funniest thing I've ever heard. It's ridiculous. They are the most ridiculous complaints I've ever heard. Especially complaining about Superman being un-American is kind of hilarious to me, and again, we'll talk about why this is in a moment. So I want to discuss each of these points in detail, and we're going to be looking at the 4 issues of the comic series that are out so far to kind of help illustrate a lot of my points, because what's funny is the people who are complaining about these things clearly haven't read the comics that are already out in this series that they're complaining about, because they address so many of everyone's concerns already. Anyway, we're going to be looking at them in the context of what's already out there in the series, and also kind of like historic Superman stuff, and a few of the DC characters and comics in general. I'm excited to talk about this. I feel like I'm rambling a little bit. Let's jump into the meat of this video. So let's start with the whole climate change argument and complaint, because this was one of the first things that people got mad about. Here's the image that is getting people so angry. It's basically just John Kent in his Superman outfit holding a sign at a protest against climate change. It's exactly the kind of protest we see in the real non-comic book world, just with Superman inserted in there. Some of the most ridiculous complaints I saw about this came from Reddit, with one person saying, Metropolis's resident alien decides to create a sign instead of using his powers to help the problem. Another person says, I feel this is why superhero comics work best in vague metaphors rather than trying to tackle real-world issues directly. Most just fall apart when you try and apply any kind of critical thought to it. Another person said, he can breathe ice. Why is he holding a sign? Wow, Superman's kind of a preacher. And finally one person said, this is just pure cringe. These are comics. If they want to fight climate change, I'm pretty sure there are more interesting things they could do with it than have the characters hold signs, and even so, this premise is just so lame for a comic. And then over on the hellhole that is Twitter, someone said, I'd be mad as hell if I saw Superman at a protest instead of easily fixing the problem by force, which I think kind of summarizes how much people misunderstand Superman and who he is as a character, especially who John Kent's Superman is going to be, and the fundamentals of him as a person. And even news articles are getting in on this though, with these guys saying, DC Comics thinks Superman's best climate action is protest, not literally his frozen breath. This story includes the line, no shade to John for wanting in on that. Superman turning out in solidarity is great, but let's hope he does more than carry a sign. After all, while Greta has superpowers that may have gotten more people to engage in protest, Superman can fly and take on evildoers directly in ways no mere mortal can. So basically people are saying, why is he trying to change people's minds and help the greater population when he could just be punching things? Again, it's such a blatant misunderstanding of who Superman is. It proves to me that none of these people have or will actually read these comics that they're complaining about. This article in particular was released last month, whereas issue 1, which actually addresses so many of these concerns, was released in July. They've had plenty of time to actually read it and catch up and realize that this Superman isn't the type to just carry a sign, and that he does want to do more, but he's not going to do that by just going out and punching things. In issue 1 of Superman, Son of Kal-El, John is literally helping put out a forest fire, which it turns out is caused by an out-of-control post-human with powers he literally cannot control. Like I said, I'm repeating myself. So John, he steps in, he calms them down, he stops them causing any more damage, and then goes back to helping put out the rest of the fire, actively tackling forest fires with his superpowers. In issue 2, he goes on to rescue a bunch of asylum seekers, escaping what it turns out to be like a corrupt country that seems to have been experimenting on them. That's not too much of a spoiler, I don't think, because not a lot's been revealed at the moment. And in issue 3, the people of Metropolis start protesting that these asylum seekers have been ill-treated while in Gotham, and when the police start to then mistreat the protesters in response, John literally steps in between them and he joins in with the protest himself and ends up getting himself arrested. Like, sure, he could have very easily broken out of his handcuffs at any point, he could have broken out of his jail cell at any point, but he didn't, and that's the point. He was making a statement, he was showing solidarity, he was saying that even though he has all this physical strength that humans have, they're still on the same level about this, he's still working with them, they still have the same power legally, because it's not all about physical strength, it's about trying to elicit change in a way that will stick. You can't just intimidate people into changing. You need to make them understand what the problem is and make sure they're making the right changes for the right reasons. And John understands this, and that's what he's trying to do. Superman, as in his dad Superman, literally comes to bail John out of prison and tells him, there's been quite the public outcry, you made sure the whole world was paying attention, and that's exactly what John was trying to do. This is something that I think DC has done a really great job of portraying in recent years when it comes to a lot of their superheroes, because they're very self-aware of the fact that a big flaw in many of them is that they feel the need to fix everything themselves and do everything themselves, and it's quite an ego thing, you know. So I think it's really lovely that DC is very aware of this, and they're making the new Superman as a character have this same level of self-awareness. And I think he definitely recognises himself that sure, he could make changes with his powers that would be a response to climate change or immigration or any other number of issues, and that would make a kind of physical change. Like, for example, the people suggesting, oh, he could use his ice breath to reduce the effects of climate change. But I think he's very aware that while that's going to be easing the symptoms, it's never going to reduce the cause. And that's what I think John wants to do. He wants to understand the cause of these problems and try and make a change there rather than just fighting the symptoms constantly. There's a great little conversation between Damian Wayne and Superman in issue 1, in which Superman, as in John Kent Superman, literally says, "I don't want to put out fires and ignore the causes." To which Damian replies, "Exactly, but it's easy to punch a ninja. A little harder to punch the climate crisis, inequality, the erosion of a free press, and the rise of demagogues." And then that issue ends on an absolutely fantastic line with them saying, "It's time for Superman to stop fighting the symptoms. You're powerful enough to be the cure." And I think that's really like a lovely summary of who this Superman is going to be and why it does make perfect sense for him to be joining in with, for example, climate change protests. Because I think he realizes that if he as Superman just runs in and tries to save the day and, for example, starts physically cooling things down with his icy breath, then people, humanity as a species, are going to get reliant on that, and they're going to stop taking personal responsibility because it doesn't matter what we do, Superman will fix it later. So then we have to ask, what happens if Superman dies or is captured or moves away from Earth? We'd end up even more screwed because we've kept doing this damage and we've got into these really bad habits, and no one's there to solve them and fix them for us. And I think Superman knows this. The Earth is our responsibility as humans, both in the fictional comic book world and in the real world, and he's trying to get us to take a little more personal responsibility, and I really, really respect that. And so that's why Superman joins in with our protests. He encourages others. He uses his influence to help. He wants humans to take personal responsibility and encourages all to take care of our home and make it a better place. He's literally helping us help ourselves. As John says to the firefighters in issue 1, we can fight this together. It's not just John coming in and saving the day and stopping the fire by himself. He literally works alongside the firefighters as part of a team. If you've ever played the Injustice games or read the comics, or I think there's a new animated film out that I've not seen yet but I really want to, but the Injustice storyline shows us what happens when we lose our Superman. And at least Batman was planning for this. He planned ahead and he tried to have kind of fail-safes in place for what would happen. And I think this is kind of Superman's way of planning ahead for what happens if we don't have Superman. Humans need to plan to stop climate change if they don't have him anymore. They need to have ways to look after immigrants or asylum seekers or the working class people or kids in abusive homes. They need to find a way to take care of those people without Superman. If he can come along and help, great. But we also need to be able to do it on our own. Both, again, as I say, in the real world and the fictional comic world as well. I think the people making these arguments and complaints and getting angry because he's only at a protest and stuff like that, they completely miss the point of who Superman is and who Superman has always been. Both the John Kent Superman and the Kal-El Superman, the original Superman. Yes, he's crazy strong, but he's always had such a strong moral compass. It's what makes Superman Superman, and I think having these really, really strong ethics that guide everything they do is one of the reasons that Superman and Batman are such close friends, and they get each other and they understand each other so well, and that they're not afraid to kind of challenge each other, but can still pull each other back from the brink when they're almost crossing that line, you know? And I think one of the really, really interesting points about Superman to remember when we talk about the original Superman, the Clark Kent Kal-El Superman, is that he's not human. And you need to remember this when it comes to this morality discussion. And again, this is a point that they bring up fantastically in this Son of Kal-El series. It's done so well. But you have to remember that even though Clark Kent grew up on Earth in America, he's not actually from here. He was never born here. He is an alien and he is fundamentally different to us. He is an outsider, and he's a different species that ultimately thinks differently to humans. And I think maybe this skews his moral code a little bit, or makes him think slightly differently, and also kind of puts boundaries in place for what he thinks he can and can't do. this is different for John because he is half human and he was born on Earth as well as growing up here. So this is his planet in a way. It will never be Superman's planet, if that makes sense. And I'm really interested to see how the series continues to explore this and looks at what are John's morals and where do they come from? How do they differ from his human mothers and alien fathers? And how have both of them influenced him and who he is and how he sees the world and how he wants to protect it? I think there's so much potential in this series and it's just really, really exciting. And this is another thing which, like I say, is addressed in the comics. So in the first issue, there's a flashback to John's birth, and Wonder Woman and Batman have this great conversation. And Batman literally says, I've run some tests. His unique physiology, Kryptonian and human. He could be more than Clark. And while Batman kind of focuses on the kind of mix of DNA and the physical stuff, Wonder Woman also reminds him that regardless of his powers, he will have the compassion of Superman, the fierce commitment of Lois Lane. And again, I think that's such an important thing to remember. John is the kid of the two of the most iconic, powerful, good, influential, and just caring characters we've ever seen in comic book history. And while that kind of puts a lot of pressure on him, I think that also creates like a lot of potential for him. Growing up with two people who love him so much and also who just love the world so much and want to do so much good in the world is going to create this incredibly kind, compassionate, caring, thoughtful, but also like a really strong and determined person. Mix that with his half human, half Kryptonian DNA, and you have so much incredible potential in this character, and I cannot wait to see how they explore that further. I think tied into this, so like a very similar argument, is a lot of people say that Superman is kind of like a boring character, or they don't really like him because he's so overpowered, and I couldn't disagree more. I don't think that makes him boring at all. I think that's only really like a surface level understanding of who Superman as a character is, because yes, he's physically probably the most powerful superhero there is. I mean, I don't know, there's probably a little bit of debate there, but let's say for the sake of this argument, he's physically the strongest, most powerful superhero there is, right? That doesn't make him boring and dull, because he's absolutely not, and I say this for both the John Kent Superman and the Clark Kent Superman, he's never just been a punch and fix it kind of guy, at least not in the best Superman stories. I'm sure there are some examples of that, especially like in the earlier days, in the early years, and the beginning of Superman, it was more about using physical force to fix things. But as Superman's kind of developed as a character and his storylines have grown and developed, in his best stories, Superman isn't just a punch and fix it kind of guy. At his core, Superman is a character with a very, very strong moral compass who wants to do good, but ultimately struggles with his own identity. He grew up on Earth, but he doesn't really belong here. He still struggles with who he is and where he's come from, and how he wants to fit into this world, which is the only one he's ever really been able to call home, but it's so hard to do that, because in order to fit in, he has to hide a part of who he is, a fundamental part of who he is. I find that in the best stories, they kind of address this and look at it and tackle it, and it usually raises some fantastic kind of like ethical issues that he faces. Like, I know a lot of people didn't like Superman and Wonder Woman together in the New 52 Justice League comics, but I really loved it because I think she understood that part of him that felt trapped in not being able to be completely 100% who he is all the time, and I think they kind of got each other and understood each other like that, and that's why I think they did actually kind of work as a couple for that period of time, and I really enjoyed it. I also think as well that's why later on when Superman kind of like comes out and says, no, like, I am Clark Kent, or Clark Kent is Superman, you know, like reveals the secret identity and stuff, you see him grow after that, and I think he becomes a lot more comfortable with who he is and more aware of who he is, and therefore he's able to be a better partner and father and savior to the world, and I think that's really good. Anyway, I'm probably rambling a bit now, so as I've said, Superman is also one of the heroes with the strongest moral code, and again, I think this is one of the things that makes him so interesting, and also makes him get on so well with Batman. And I love that this is actually like discussed in the comics, in the Son of Kal-El comics. So before he disappears, which that's not a spoiler because it's one of the big reasons why like John Kent takes on the Superman title, because his dad has to go away. I won't say much more, but before he disappears, the original Superman and John have this little chat on the moon while they're kind of like watching the Earth and looking over it all. And John straight up asks him, "Why don't you do more?" Which I think is something a lot of readers have kind of been asking for years, but the answer's kind of always been there. But anyway, Superman straight up gives him an answer here, to which he replies that he's basically constantly worried about overstepping his boundaries and what's appropriate, because Earth isn't really his planet. He wasn't born here. He doesn't necessarily feel he has the authority to do X, Y, and Z. But he reminds John that John doesn't have this problem. To John, it is home. He is part human, and he has these powers. So he doesn't need to have that moral dilemma. It is his place to fix these things if he wants to, and he should feel comfortable doing that. Like, Superman literally tells him, "This is your planet, John. This is your place." And it seems so far like John is kind of really taking that to heart and stepping up and taking some responsibility and wanting to do better for it. And I really, really love that. And because of that, I'm really excited to see where the rest of this series goes. So this kind of leads us on to the second big criticism that I've seen people throwing around Superman at the minute, and that is that with everything DC have been doing with Superman recently, apparently comics are getting too political. And grumble, 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 something, something. And so to the people who are currently getting mad about this and angry about this and complaining online about this, I guess all I really have to say to them is, have you ever actually read a comic? Especially when it comes to superhero comics. Of course they're political. Of course they cover social issues. Of course aliens and monsters and fighting are normally analogies for real world problems. But they also fight a lot of real world everyday villains too. They absolutely always have. Today, the new Superman's motto is truth, justice, and a better world, but that is absolutely not a new sentiment at all. So back in the 40s, his little motto was changed to be truth, justice, and the American way, but this was introduced less to be about Superman's inherent values and more to use Superman as a tool for propaganda to make people feel better about World War II and get people being all like, yeah, America fighting something, something, something. Therefore, Superman has always been inherently political and used as a tool for political propaganda. Over the years, he's had so many other taglines and slogans associated with him, the very earliest of which was simply Superman, champion of the oppressed. We'll talk about that in a second, but this kind of brings me briefly onto the other criticism that I saw raised, that someone actually DM'd me about, complaining that Superman was becoming un-Americanized, which may just be the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. Yes, Superman landed in America and was raised in America, but he's an alien. He's not American. He's not even human. By the logic of most Americans today, if Superman really existed and he was just dropped into your country and you had to raise him, everyone would be complaining about how he's an illegal immigrant and you'd chuck him out the first chance you could, especially if he didn't look white. It's absolutely ridiculous. In the real world, Superman would not be accepted as an American. You would not allow him to call himself an American. And so now, claiming that you want him to be an American and complaining that he's looking after the planet and not just your country is the most ridiculous, hypocritical piece of crap I've ever heard. Superman is an alien who cares about people. All people. The entire planet that he's living on, not just Americans. Just because his literal spaceship landed in one country and not another, that doesn't mean he should only be loyal to that one country, especially not when that country is so messed up and has so many issues. I really, really like this new John Kent version of Superman because he literally sees the Earth as a planet, as a whole, and he cares about everyone regardless of imaginary boundaries that humans keep putting up. I honestly think that the less American Superman gets, the better. But that rant aside, let's go back to this whole champion of the oppressed thing, because that's basically who Superman has always been and still is today. The very first issues, way back in the day, saw Superman fight to save a wrongly accused woman from being executed. They saw him taking on corrupt politicians. They saw him saving a woman from domestic violence, which is another reason I love Superman. My little hero. Over the years, the original Superman went on to fight white supremacists, protect immigrants, stop child abuse. There are also a few more stories over the years that were absolutely questionable or just outright unacceptable products of their time. For example, the one in which he pretty much encourages Lois Lane to go into blackface in order to interview some local people in Metropolis. not okay. Very racially insensitive. So many problems with that. But I think over the years, times have changed, the comics have changed, the characters have changed, and modern day Superman is far more aware of the importance of issues like racial equality and sensitivity and so on. So, the point I'm trying to make is, despite a few blunders with individual storylines here and there, generally Superman has always been someone to fight for the underdog and fight for social causes and look after people. This isn't a new thing. I mean, just look at who his main love interest is, Lois Lane. She is a journalist who literally covers these kinds of topics all the time. Corrupt politicians, social issues, fighting for social justice, and basically giving voices to the little people who don't have them on their own. This is who Lois Lane is, and she is a fundamental part of the Superman comics. Of course, they've always been political. And like I say, Superman is not the only DC character that gets political and social by any means. Wonder Woman is like a feminist icon for all women everywhere. She's incredible. Aquaman protects the world's oceans. Poison Ivy and Swamp Thing are essentially just environmentalists with some crazy magic powers, if you want to put it that way. They're literally working to protect the green in like every single storyline. Even if those methods are somewhat morally ambiguous at times, they still think they're doing the right thing for the planet and the environment. Political! Look at all the Batman stories as well. Batman is insanely political in so many of his stories. The Arkham stories take a critical look at mental health care and heavily criticize its treatment of patients, especially those classed as criminally insane. Plus, Bruce Wayne is constantly involved in politics and investing in Gotham and trying to make the city a better place. He's always fighting this battle within himself for how he thinks he can do the most good and make the most difference with power and money and influence as Bruce Wayne, or anonymously and with force as Batman. There are multiple story arcs in which, you know, he tackles corrupt politicians, organised crime, the morality of hoarding wealth, accountability for the police force. One of Batman's biggest villains is Two-Face, who, Harvey Dent, was a politician. He was the district attorney. It's political. I don't know how many more ways I can say this and how many more examples I can give. DC Comics have always had a political agenda. They've always covered social causes. They've always fought for social justice. Well, mostly always. Again, let's not talk about the blackface thing. And even though there clearly is, even if there wasn't an historical basis for comics to talk about these issues, why shouldn't fun fictional stories include messages like respect others, stop destroying the planet, remember Group X are still human beings like you? I can only see that as a positive thing. I don't think it detracts from good storytelling. I don't think it detracts from being able to use aliens and fighting and monsters and whatever. It's just nice to have a positive message alongside a fun story, and I don't really see any downside to that. And now, finally, let's talk about John Kent's bisexuality, because this is probably the thing that has people most angry and most mad, and it's the most ridiculous one, let's be honest. John Kent, as many 18-year-olds do, questions his sexuality in this new series, and part of his process of exploring this and discovering who he is involves him kissing his friend Jay in issue 5 of Superman, Son of Kal-El. And people are mad. Like, really mad. Good old Wendy Rogers here says, Superman loves Lois Lane. Period. Hollywood is trying to make Superman gay, and he is not. Just rename the new version Superman so we can know the difference and avoid seeing it. Nothing like a little homophobia in the morning, is there? Oh, this woman. But I just have to ask, who is this Lois Lane? And if Superman already loves a man named Lois Lane, then surely that already makes him gay. I don't know. But no, I think the bigger issue here is that she thinks Superman must always be in love with Lois Lane. I think it's a typo. We can allow it. In which case, I have to say, Wendy, why are you so okay with incest? Do you really want this new Superman to be in love with his mother? Because I think I'm quite liberal. I think I'm quite open-minded, but I have to say I do draw the line at incest in comics. And I mean, this is clearly a Lois Lane stan right here, and, you know, what can I say? Lois is pretty damn cool. I just hope Wendy here also kicked up as much of a fuss when Superman and Wonder Woman had a relationship in the New 52 Justice League comics, because we all know Superman loves Lois Lane, period. Hollywood is just trying to make Wonder Man a thing, and it's just not. Also, I'm sorry, but where does Hollywood come into this? Since when did DC Comics Hollywood? Anyway. But do you see what I mean? This tweet is thoroughly ridiculous through and through and through, and it just epitomizes everything that I've been saying. These people are getting mad about comics that they've never read and will never read just for the sake of it, because they want their homophobia to show. This is the problem when you only read the headlines and react to headlines instead of educating yourself and understanding something before you react angrily. There's so many people saying things like this on Reddit. I don't think he should, as the law is, he loves Lois Lane and no one else. Again, that's not historically true at all. Superman has had other love interests. One example being Wonder Woman. And two, this isn't Clark Kent. This is John Kent. Stop trying to make him have sex with his mother. Another random person sticking their nose in for no reason and just being ridiculous was Christopher Biggins, who, I'll be honest, I only ever hear about these days when people on Reddit threads post a question like, what celebrity did you meet who ended up being an utter twat? And everyone always says Christopher Biggins. So there you go, that's his claim to relevancy these days. He decided to stick his nose into this when he said, if you want to do something like this, do something original. Don't take characters that already exist and make them into something they're not. He added that the company shouldn't pander to the woke system. So basically, his complaint is that he wants DC to do exactly what DC already did. What a great contribution from Christopher Biggins, one which we absolutely could not have done without. This person here decided that Superman is no longer Superman if he is under the LGBT community, whatever that means. Apparently, by birth, any man who does things against his creation is perceived to be a coward, which is one, a load of crap, and two, are we forgetting that neither Kal nor John are actually human men? So I don't think your point stands at all. John is half human, but Kal is full-on Kryptonian. Maybe instead of worrying that John just went out and smooched the boy, we should be more like Batman and worried about what the hell a half-human, half-Kryptonian can actually do. What even is normal for a half-human, half-Kryptonian? We don't know. There's never been one before. Maybe he'll spontaneously combust. Maybe he'll try and take over the world. Maybe he'll turn evil. We don't know. I think there are bigger things to worry about than whether John thinks boys are pretty or not. I love how everyone is absolutely okay with interspecies relationships of Kryptonians and humans, which is essentially bestiality, let's be honest, because they look like a human man and woman. But the minute it's a half-human and a post-human who happen to present as the same gender, suddenly it's bad. No, your priorities are skewed, mate. There are also plenty of people arguing that it's not the bisexuality that's the problem. It's the fact that people are sexualizing superheroes. That's what's bad. Just like this Fox News journalist said. Raymond Arroyo furiously questioned why DC Comics was sexualizing superheroes. Call me when they have a gender-stable aisle with superheroes whose sexualities we know nothing about. Why are they sexualizing superheroes? I was a Batman and Superman and Spider-Man kid. I loved those heroes. We just wanted them to get the bad guys, not a venereal disease. Leave our comic book heroes alone. Which might actually hold some weight if he argued the same thing about any other superhero who displays any ounce of sexual behavior at all, which, let me think about it, is all of them. I'd love for him to read the New 52, Red Hood, and the Outlaws comics, in which Starfire is just incredibly sexually liberated and free. Her outfits in that are incredibly sexual and revealing. She's an incredibly sexual being. But apparently, that's not worth writing articles about. That's not worth getting mad about. He doesn't complain that she's going to go around giving people a venereal disease. No, apparently it's acceptable when it's heterosexual and a woman doing it. It's not okay when it happens to be a teenage boy kissing another teenage boy. How is this okay, but this isn't? Hell, even Superman and Lois Lane have had wilder, more explicit kisses than this one between John and Jay. Just admit you're a homophobe and leave us alone to enjoy an interesting character with an interesting story arc that's going to actually help a lot of people. Because let's be honest, seeing yourself represented in characters like this, especially big mainstream characters with big iconic names like Superman, is going to help so many people. It's going to have such a positive impact to see yourself represented in these ways. I saw a few wonderful comments on Reddit from people which I think show just how much impact characters like these can have and how important it is for this kind of representation. This person said, "The kids growing up confused about their sexuality care. Being represented and feeling normal can do wonders for mental health, and without it we'd continue having more and more depressed youth confused about who they are." This person said, "I'm in my early 40s. Without a doubt, I would have benefited from more representation of bi men in the media and public life. I'm in my 40s too, and I absolutely agree that having more representation would have helped me. I ended up repressing all my feelings and desires for 25 years or so because I didn't even know bisexuality was a thing back in the 80s and 90s. It's so easy for some people to sit there and say, oh, it's pandering. Oh, it's just being pretend woke. Oh, they're just ticking a box. Like, it's easy for people to say that when all the big iconic characters you're currently seeing are like you, when you're already represented. You don't realize how important it is for people. For people who are going through exactly what John is right now, and they're questioning their sexuality, they're exploring who they are. They might have realized they're bisexual. They might have feelings for a friend like Jay. The people who are going through this now, for them, literally having the most powerful superhero in the world being just like you is a huge deal. That representation does matter. Normalizing bisexuality does matter. Normalizing exploring your sexuality, questioning it, figuring out who you are does matter. This guy unintentionally summed it up when he was being snarky when he said, there doesn't seem to be any normal anymore. That's life, I suppose. And I know he was saying it to be like angry, to be moody, to be like, oh, this is a bad thing. But honestly, this is exactly the point. There's no one normal. This is normal. Bisexual people are normal. Gay people are normal. People kissing is normal. And comics are just finally catching up to reflect that, and it's about time. What's not normal is a half-human, half-alien flying around the globe with laser eyes and ice breath, but apparently people can accept that, but not a man kissing a man. It's very interesting where people will draw these lines and argue that this is okay but this isn't, and blah blah blah, just to kind of cover up for their own bigotry and intolerance. Yeah, I think that's where I'm going to end this here. I've talked for a long time, this is getting quite long now, but I just wanted a little rant about Superman, to talk a little bit about the history of it. Yeah, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. What do you think of the new Superman comics? Do you like the stories so far? Do you, like me, do you think there's a lot of potential in them? Where would you like to see them take John's character? What other stories would you like to see? How do you feel about people who get mad about his climate change protests and his kissing a boy and this and so on? Like, let me know your thoughts down in the comments. Or if you have nothing to say on this, just let me know who is your favourite superhero, because I'd love to hear. But thank you for watching today. I appreciate your time and you watching so much, and I'll see you again soon.